Hey everybody, welcome to another week. You are hanging out with me, Szu-Moy, and this is Sipping with Sue time, and we are chatting with real people doing real things extraordinarily. And welcome to another week, and it is fantastic. Just traveled in from Colorado. It's still cold here. It's as cold in freaking Colorado as it is in San Antonio. It's like a nightmare. I don't know what's going on, but I think we've got our ice front coming in. But we are closing out celebrating Black History Month, and I couldn't think of anyone better to close us out than my good friend here, Greg Brundidge, and his journey to Africa that happened 3 years ago. So welcome, Greg. Cheers.
Hey, Szu-Moy, thank you. Cheers to you.
Cheers. Ooh, what are you drinking?
I have tea in a mug, and this is classified liquid here.
Classified liquid.
Classified liquid, a 15-year-old, actually.
Oh, a 15-year.
I'm,
Okay.
I'm being a good uncle tonight.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, awesome. I love it. So cheers. We were both in Colorado just a little bit ago. And so Greg and I have known each other for how long now?
Oh, man, was it my time in probably 6 years, 7 years or so.
So like 2016, 17 then?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
one of the trips out to, no, when Juan was at SRA.
So then that was like 2015.
Yeah, that would be back around the 14, 15 time frame.
Yeah, so yeah,
That's
we've
when I met
known each
Juan,
other
and
for a while.
then I figured out that he married way up when I met you. So, good for him, So yeah,
Thank
no,
you.
that was. So we're working on maybe 7 or 8 years now.
Yeah, it's been awesome. And Greg did this. So just so you guys are aware, Greg and I go back, and his wife Diane is amazing, and we've known each other for quite some time. We do our annual trip to Hawaii. It's been a little bit of a while because of COVID, but
Yeah.
with our Aloha Posse. But Greg is also military, and so he's my military brother in arms as well. And so veteran general officer doing all great things for our United States Air Force. But so when we actually looked at this presentation, so Greg did this trip about 3 years ago. So tell us a little bit about why you initially wanted to go on this trip to Africa.
Okay, so Diane and I had always said we need to go to Africa for a lot of different reasons, right? But when we hit the 2019 year, if you know that history, 1619 was the first, entry of enslaved Africans into what was in the colonies, right? A Jamestown landing. And there were all types of activities going on in 19 to commemorate that, highlight that. And we said, what a great trip it would be to go to West Africa, which is where a lot of the slave trade happened. And oh, by the way, through a friend of ours, we heard, well, NAACP is sponsoring a 250-person trip to Ghana. And Ghana had already set up a huge program called the Year of Return, and were inviting Americans to come back and see, the area in Africa from which so many millions actually left. So we said, that's what we'll do. So we signed up, ended up there with two of my academy classmates, their family. So it was a group of us that went. And the real aim was to go back and just learn about the ancestry part of this. Ghana's a beautiful country. There's a lot to see and do there. But for us, we were really interested in this thread they were pulling on, the 2019 being that 400 years, since as far as Africans coming to America, that's when that started. So 4 centuries ago, pretty cool. And once I got there, I realized this was going to be much more than just learning about a country and a people. It was going to take us back on an ancestral kind of a trip that I'm still just feeling the effects of that today.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure. Fantastic. So I know that you have a bit of so you got your journey. And so for those of the folks out there that don't know, Greg is also a very, very good photographer. So he actually captured this entire journey and this entire trip. And it was a week long or 9 days, or how long?
10 days. It was 10 days there in Ghana, different parts. And we found that, I took one of my good travel cameras, not the best one to take the best pictures, but one that I could move it quickly with, right? So I ended up with over 500 shots on this trip, that I ended up sharing with everyone there. They all appreciated it because I caught just about everybody on that trip at some point in one of the pictures or another. So, but for tonight, I pulled together some that I thought really captured some of the emotional parts of the trip. There's also a slideshow we'll run about maybe a little over 3 minutes, between 3 and 4 minutes, that with music will highlight the whole trip. Lots of the scenery, lots of the people, and some of the things we did. The things I'm going to talk about are included in that show as well. But I didn't want to spend time on Ghana, the sightseeing part, and not have time to talk about why we went and what really impacted our lives. Diane and I both came back, I think, really looking differently at our history, our ancestry, everything. So that's what we'll spend some time on. Yeah, I think you downloaded probably about a 20 slides. I think I'll go through very quickly, but it'll give you a sense of the part of the journey that made the most impact on us.
Awesome. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started with that.
Okay. Yeah. So hold it there. That first slide showed a sign that highlighted a park that we go to, the Ancestral River, and that part of the trip was something that we did after we had been to the castle, because we went to the castle. I'll get to that later. But this was the part of the trip that showed some of that journey that Africans that had been captured from different parts of the region in West Africa and headed off to what they had slave forts along the coast. Cape Coast is where we were, and you'll see that in a minute. Elmina was another one down the coast, maybe about 4 miles, 5 miles away. But along the African coast, before they got on ships, put them on ships, the captured and enslaved Africans were all brought to forts to hold until the next set of ships came. So we're going to go now, and this is going to be part of the trail that was along that journey that came from various parts of interior Western Africa, Central Africa, all the way to these forts where the slaves were held. Okay, next one, Szu-Moy. Okay, so this next, I think did we hit two? We might have gone by one. The next slide shows the captivity process. There were folks, this was business, right? There were traders that went into different parts of Africa on the West Coast there, captured Africans. Some were traded for, some were bought, a lot of different reasons. Others just raided villages and captured them. And then they began the process of transporting them to the slave forts. So, and these pictures you're seeing is artwork that was on the wall. It's like a mural of a series of events that happened through the slave trade process. And I thought it would be the best way to talk through the process that happened on the other side of the ocean. We talk a lot about what happened once they landed at Charleston and other ports where there were slave markets in our history. But this is what happened before that, how those Africans come to arrive at those ports in America. So let's go to the next one. If we can just move one next. This one is over a river. There were jungle parts to this trail. Okay, yes, there we go. Let's hold that one. Along the trail there, they're basically, once they were captured, there were very few places along the trail to wash. If they had rain, they were able to, shower if they hit a stream somewhere. But there was one river that ran north-south that most places on their way into Elmina and Camp the other Cape Coast fort, there was a river big enough for groups of people to be in the river and bathe. And so this became known as River of the Last Bath. And this is what this picture, artist rendition, pictures are kind of simple, but the story is told. This was the last opportunity before they went to the the castles, slave castles, and the dungeons, and then were loaded on the ships. So this was a significant point. We went to this river, and we'll show you pictures of that a little later. Okay, next one. Okay. And one more. Okay, now after the long line, and some of these range from 20, 25 miles that were near the coast up to 50 over 100 miles as they went more interior. And a lot of times there were several stops along the way. But again, the whole goal was to get them to the forts where they could be basically held in the dungeons until the ships were ready for loading. So here's the artist's rendition of the captive Africans being taken into the fort. Okay, next one. And of course, once the word was out and Africans understood what was going on with this entire process, those that didn't want to go, there were those that tried to resist, but normally you couldn't. Basically, the captors were had too much firepower and the means to subdue. So is that? I think we're showing two shots there somewhere. Is there a way to back up and do that again, or? If that's as good as it gets, you'll see a scene where there it is. They're sitting there, basically, showing some beatings and things that are going on. It was essentially, in order to meet requirements and quota for numbers, they had to subdue and make sure they had enough. And some of the Africans died, at the fort or as a result of resisting and being punished or killed. Next. All right, and then the basically the sale process started on this side of the ocean. The folks that were taking them across the ocean, were basically paying for certain groups, anywhere from 100 to 200 or 300 slaves that they could put on a ship, depending on how big it was. And so the merchants, this picture represents the process of highlighting what they had captured and what they were selling in terms of those who had been who were basically being enslaved from this point forward. Okay. Now, while at the slave castle, there were just really these crazy conditions, and I'll talk to that. We'll show you some of that in a couple of pictures coming up. Okay, next. Okay, there's the subduing, and then again more of the selling, bartering, and things that go on in terms of essentially selling people to go in and become sources of labor for folks in America and other parts of North and South America and the Caribbean. Okay, next. All right, and then at the point that the ships were there, the process of loading them, taking them out of the dungeons and onto the ships. And any of you that have been to the African American History Museum, there are mock-ups and all kinds of artifacts that capture this period. And this is an artist rendition of how Africans were stacked, usually in the berth of the ship, depending how big, determine the number. But this was a way to maximize the number you could transport. They were in chains, couldn't move, and essentially had to make that weeks-long journey across the ocean, to the port where they would then be offloaded. All kinds of things happened on some of the trips. Ships sank, others got sick, the enslaved died, and they ended up throwing them overboard. There were resistance and rebellion kinds of things. There's a great movie out. I'm not going to remember the name of it, but it kind of tells the story of one of the slave ships that happened on the way over to America. So once they are loaded, then the second half of the whole experience happened once they landed on the other side of the ocean and were then sold to farmers and others who needed the labor to do their crops. Okay, next. All right, now we get to some of the pictures that we have of us in this same area. Those were the artist renditions. Those were all like murals on a wall in this park that you could walk by and look. And there was another artist that had a separate rendition of the same thing. Now we go through to where that river was. This is along the trail. They have this marked very well. Okay, we're going into what they call Slave River. All right, next. Okay. Now we're in, and you see this little arch, and this has all been marked to kind of show where these things happened historically. The last bath. This is the path, down this trail that took you to the river. And what they did for us who were returning, they allowed us to go down that same path and actually get into the river. I was doing the photos, so I didn't really get too much of my stuff wet, but I was standing close enough to watch folks, wade through that water, come across on the shallow part where there were rocks to step on, and they were able to, essentially, go through that same area and saw what a lot of the enslaved did to wash up and clean up, before they went to the forts in the next, 3 to 5 days of the journey. Okay, next picture. Now, these next couple of images are just folks that are doing that crossing. They got to the river. There was a shallow area, so you didn't have to, submerge yourself in there like they did the slaves to wash. But you could go and get your feet wet. And I think there's one more picture you could move through there, Szu-Moy, if you can get it to come through. Yeah, there's another one. See, they stayed on the rocks. The water was probably 3 to 4 feet deep, so deep enough to step down in and get wet and wash. But here we have 250 folks that were coming through here in the course of in groups, and this was the group we were with that did this. Next. And here's a picture of the slave Fort Elmina. This wasn't the one we were at. I was standing at Cape Coast Slave Fort looking down the coast, and this was a second fort. A little bit a different design, but still used for the same purpose. Hold the slaves until the ships came to load them up. Next. And this is actually Cape Coast. You have the, can we back up? That's just, again, these were no kidding forts that could be, that could defend themselves against attackers, because at the time, folks could come in and raid the forts and steal slaves, the enslaved Africans. So they wanted protection. And it could have been earlier in history. They were used for other things along the coast to protect. But for these days, this all started in the 1500s and went all into the well into the 1800s, where that was a place where ships picked up the slaves to head off to shores across the ocean. Okay, next. All right, again, another shot of the battery to protect the fort. Now, this is an entry into the dungeons. And this is where it really began to impact all of us who traveled, because now we actually walked where Africans who came before us, and in many cases where our ancestors had walked. And the deeper we went into this thing, the more solemn and I think emotional a lot of people became. So let's go through these next series of slides. This is an entry into one. There were several entries like this. This was the male entry. Now, President Obama and First Lady Michelle had paid a visit there during the time he was in office, and they were still talking about it like it happened yesterday. This was 2019, and they were loving the fact that, what that meant to have an African-American president come back to a place where ancestors potentially in his change. Now, his dad was not a West African, I don't believe, but needless to say, from the continent, here's a person that represents that diaspora, that group of people that left, who has gone through, his ancestors had gone through many things, and he came back, as the leader of a nation that had held captive Americans and enslaved them. So this meant a lot to the Ghanaians, and so lots of festivities and things around this visit. Okay, next. Here's an entry. As you can see, light coming from outside just quickly diminished as you went into the dungeon. So back then they had torches and things to provide light. So we descended down these stairs into various holding rooms. Each room was designed to hold 1,000 of captive Africans standing, again, face to back, side to side, not a lot of room to move. And they stayed that way until the ships. Those who arrived early had it easy. Those who arrived right before the ships came were really packed in pretty tight. Next. And then next, these are just a series of shots that walk us through. Okay, right here, you can see they had electric lights put in place so we could see where we're going. Once we got past a certain point, you either had to have your own light or you were using light coming in through the holes that were cut into the dungeon from the outside. And it was dark, very dark. Okay, let's go through the next couple. Yeah, here we go. Stop here. This is how it looked. Now, for those of you who know photography, you can rig your camera to be sensitive to light. And this was taken without flash and with only the light that was coming in. And I had to really, to be able to see someone, I had to leverage that exposure to see the people without, playing funny things with the camera. You could not see any of the people standing there. All that light was above head, and it was not dispersing very well throughout that particular dungeon room. But this is one of the rooms, 1,000 people. Imagine 1,000 people, 1,000 humans in there stacked in, waiting for the next slave ship to come and load them on. Okay, next. And once we got in and the light sources were available, we turned them back on so we could see the presenter. Here's our tour guide, and he was excellent. Had a lot of great stories from the histories and the various records that were done of what went on in the slave castles. Next. Another shot looking from the other side. And this was called, can you back up one that we missed? That one last shot was called the cell. And this one hit a lot of us hard because if anyone was taken into this particular room, they weren't coming back alive. And usually it was the folks that were, the rebellious captives, the ones who were causing trouble or sick. Once they reached a point where they didn't feel they could handle getting them either to act properly or they weren't going to live, they take them to the cell and just leave them until they died. And then they'd bring them out and dispose of the bodies. Okay, next. Okay, again. Then the really cool part about this trip that we're on is rather than the last bath, they called this the first bath of the return. So everyone that came in as part of this trip walked through the water, came up these steps, and came through this arch. And it was, again, symbolizing the descendants of those who had been taken away. And this is in the millions. Some estimate throughout the slave trade up and down the Americas and other parts of the world, over 14 million Africans were taken. So that's a large diaspora of folks. And then to have 400 years later to come back and symbolize, some of the descendants returning, this was pretty awesome. Okay, next slide. And there we are, standing right there. Back up one, if we can catch that one. I should have given you more time on each slide some more. I'm sorry. Here we go. This is at the end of the water crossing. And those who were, had done the crossing were standing there at the base of the stairs to come up under that arch, the first bath of the return. Okay, go ahead now. Let's. The last part of this is kind of a cool thing they had us all do. They gave us 3x5 cards. Everyone could write a note to the ancestors, and this is going to be put inside of this this group of this pile of wood, and they were going to set it fire and offer it up as an offering to all of the ancestors who had gone before. another very emotional moment for all of us, who basically knew that somewhere along the way we had someone in our bloodline that survived all of this and the enslavement in America. So, okay, and then they set it at Firecast. The next two shots you can just roll through pretty quick. You'll see that this was all different people. All of us that went up and put something in there on a card. They lit it, and then it caught fire, and it burned. And there's my wife standing there, and we were all feeling pretty good about it. So that's that was the heart of the trip for most of us, Szu-Moy. We really enjoyed Ghana, but we really were struck by that aspect of knowing that in our history, we had people in our bloodline that went through that. And in order for us to be here today, they had to survive, right? You know, you think about it.
You had to go through all of that just to get here.
Millions
For you
died.
to get here.
Yeah, for you to be here with you tonight talking about this, they had to survive. That bloodline survived to get the Brundidges that we know today here.
So talk a little bit about the Brundidges. Let's talk a little bit about the name, because that's probably one of the most interesting and kind of twists, I think, to all of it. That most people that have the name Smith or Jones or whatever can link their name back to something and to some family tree. And for some of us, it doesn't always work that way.
No.
So talk to us a little bit about that.
And that was another thing that was just, apparent. As part of this trip, so those who wanted to could go through a naming ceremony to actually get an African name, which was really cool. We didn't do that because just time and other things that we wanted to get done, but it was offered up to anyone that wanted to. But bottom line is, we did. My family, some of my relatives and I said, we're going to trace the Brundidge name back for African Americans. We went back all the way to, it was the early 1800s, and it was Charleston. It was the first place where we saw that name being assigned to slaves. And that's where we figure it started. A lot of our ancestors were taken to Georgia and Alabama. And that's where we traced once when they start counting the population, censuses started, they were taking census. We got records of Brundidges back into like 1870, when they were counting the number that were living on farms or sharecropping or whatever the case was. And he said, okay, well, there's where the Brundidge name came from the owners who had us there in Georgia and Alabama. And there's more stories that I don't want to go into, but bottom line is, if I wanted to trace Brundidge, I'd eventually run into a shield and other things for that name that are Welsh. Okay, so we know who the owners and their name came from, but that's not the name that we were born with. That's our lineage, our ancestors. There was a name much different and didn't sound like that, right? Yeah, thank you. And so we but you know what? It is what it is. And as long as I can know and acknowledge that, one of the things I say all the time, Szu-Moy, just knowing where we came from, and Diane says this a lot as well, knowing where we came from and how we got here is enough to make us proud of the folks that had to endure the things that they endured. And we said, look, we owe them a tribute because, they were blessed and fortunate to make it through and endure, and we're here. And so we owe it to them. I think of the ending of Saving Private Ryan, when Private Ryan is there with his family and he asks, was I a good man? And then I think about, if I ever have the chance to sit and meet those who went before me, have I done a good job? Because those who went before us didn't have anything, didn't know what the future held, but they endured, they persevered, and I'm here because of them. And I would love to say I'm doing things that make them proud, that they survive. So I got a little choked up. Like I said, it was an emotional time.
I'm sure. Yeah. I can imagine.
So anyway, that's the name thing. A lot of folks want to change their name. Hey, we said, well, it's our job now, given how my dad took Brundidge and his dad, we need to make Brundidge a name to be proud of for African Americans. And that's how we're proceeding.
Okay.
And that's how we look at it. That's not how everyone looks at it. A lot of folks say, I don't want my enslaved name. I want a
Sure.
different name, and they change it, and more power to them. I totally have nothing against that. So anyway, that's the story. We are so proud of who we are, and I just wish, the goal of having African American History Month is something that we know we don't focus on it. So many things we learn about ourselves we learn during this month versus
Mhm.
those who study African American history and all of the things that go on that brought us here. We don't get that, and even in the books that we use for studying here in this country, the story is really diminished sometimes in terms of what they share about how things happen and who did what. It's history that we should learn, but not punish anyone for. It was
Mhm.
bad, and there were things that were done that were wrong. But I look at it as this is how we learn not to let it happen again.
Yes. Yeah.
How we
I
move
agree.
forward and
Yeah.
embrace all Americans. I mean, this has been a battle for respect and dignity and equality for everyone that stands up and says, "I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America," you
Mhm.
know, and the republic for which it stands, one nation under God. I mean, all of those are wonderful things that we all say. Do we really mean them? You know,
I
we
hope
should
so.
we
You
should
would hope so.
really mean those. Yeah, yeah. And then all
Yeah.
of our documentation, all men are created equal. It's just we have the foundation for a great society, and it is a great society. We got to keep moving forward so that everyone can feel the same equality, liberty, justice that everybody else
And
has.
those things that our ancestors did not have.
Absolutely. I mean,
Yes.
think about it.
That's
What
what
they
we need
went
to move
through was
forward to.
so that we could be here to take
Yeah.
part of this. So you're so right, Szu-Moy.
Yes.
And so thanks for letting me do this. I mean, I love sharing this
Absolutely.
experience. I really do, and I just hope that those who were able to tune in, got something out of it. It's something that has just again changed how I feel about who I am, where I came from, and why God has me here today. you know,
Absolutely,
it's
absolutely.
important. Yeah.
And I want to go ahead and showcase the rest of your videos that we have to music. So I'm going to go ahead and play
Yeah, let
that
me
now.
introduce this next. What you will see now, all of the things I just showed you, and the beginning of the trip. This is all the tourist stuff that we did, all captured in about a 4-minute video with music. So everyone enjoy what you're about to see.
Awesome. awesome.
Well, there you have
we
it.
always we always say what's in a name, right? What's in a name? And now you can see like there's a lot going on and what's behind your name and the story that can literally be unfolded on where that name came from and all of the things that people had to endure to come
Yeah,
up with what we have today.
yeah,
So
no, that's
amazing.
so, it was such a trip, and I know I ran a little long on my narrative part, but
You're
I,
good. You're good.
just I hope for all Americans, anyone that wants to go see this side of African American history and our story before we arrive, I think a trip to Africa, any West African country, you can kind of get a sense of this. But I want to go back. I want to go to South America. I want to go to East Africa. I want to go see different parts of the continent. It's huge, and a lot of different people. Even though we're all Africans, all Africans are not the same. It's a lot
Well,
of
just like the United States of America, we're all different in here
different.
too. So it's like, yes, absolutely. You get onto the onto Africa, you're going to have all walks of life there too.
Right, right. So, but so happy you let us have time to do this some more. You're a sweetheart, and we love you. And just
Love
thank
you
you
too.
for including us in your program to be able to share this. I have one other thing I want to show. I showed it to you at the beginning.
Yes,
It's
yes.
this again. I bought this when I was in Ghana. What it has. There are like 16, maybe 18 of these symbols. This one is honoring God Almighty. And of course, that means a lot to me. And but there are others for harvest, for you name all of the various things you do in life. And this is formal wear, for me. Anytime I have to put the African garb, and I've got some other
You're
dashes.
like, okay, got it.
Yeah. So, and I appreciate the colors you're honoring tonight. So good on you. Thank you,
You
man.
know, I've got my one love on, of course.
So
Absolutely.
no, again, thanks, Szu-Moy. So grateful to you for
Yeah, no, I appreciate you coming out again. When we sat, Juan and myself sat in that presentation the first time, it was amazing. So I'm happy that you guys are that you're able to like show that here
yeah,
and to be able to like just it's an important message. So like again, what's in a name? Like some people can say, well, my name is Jones, and they can trace it back to the very first
centuries to yeah,
yes, Jones or whatever it is.
yep,
And some of us can't do that. So
can't do it. Oh,
it's a good story to tell, and people need to kind of listen to it and hear it and understand that it was a lot of trial and a lot of uphill battle and a lot of you know things that some of us had to go through to kind of figure out where our name came from and how our ancestors adopted some of those
absolutely.
names.
The
So yeah,
ancestors, it's
yes.
honoring the things that they did so that we could be here today is just
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing. I appreciate it so
Thank
much.
you for the opportunity.
And so, like what I like to do with all of my guests, we like to do a just for fun speed round. So we're going to do that really quickly.
Okay,
So you're ready?
ready.
Favorite part about going to Africa?
Just understanding my ancestors and the story there.
Awesome. Okay. So favorite food that you tried while you were over
Oh
there?
my gosh. They had this rice dish, and see, I wish I had 9, and she might remember the name of it. It was a spicy rice,
Okay.
kinda like red beans, but it wasn't red beans and rice. Very similar.
Mhm.
We ate so much of that.
You're like, yes, please. I'll take
It
more.
yeah, it was well seasoned, and it was delicious. So we had a lot of that rice, but, there were other the meats, everything is well seasoned there. They do a lot of good seasoning. If I didn't recognize it or couldn't trace it to some meat that I knew, I wouldn't eat it, though.
Oh my goodness. So you're one of those. Okay,
Yeah, I'm one of
gotcha.
those guys. Where'd this come from? What kind of meat is this? So yeah.
Okay, so you did allude to wanting to go back to Africa. So what is the other place in Africa you like to go and you haven't been?
Well, I'd love to go to South Africa.
Okay,
Understanding that story is pretty awesome to see and they're still working through a lot of the same things
sure,
there.
sure.
They didn't have to leave to be enslaved or mistreated or handled unequally, but
Mhm.
they have gone through a journey just like so many other Africans have. I'd
Mhm.
love to do in sub-Saharan Africa. But then I'd love to go up along the Med and do that part of, it's just one of those things. If we have
Mhm.
time and God blesses us to travel, I'd like to see various parts of that continent, you know.
Absolutely. I have yet to explore a little bit more. We did a little part of it when we went to Egypt.
Hmm.
Um, and I could see Morocco from Spain. That was the only thing that I was able to do, right? And then we did that little 24-hour blip when we went
Yes,
to Egypt. But we may, and if it's my choice, we have on our list that we may be heading down a little bit more south.
okay,
Africa
okay.
this year,
Yeah,
or this.
no, I
So
think,
I'm hoping that we can get to like Madagascar
oh
and
yeah,
that area. So
yeah,
that's my choice, but we're a team, so we'll figure it out. It's on our wish list, and he agreed. So that may be our next big trip, and
great,
we'll see
great.
you guys and have that
Yeah,
journey to
yeah,
go along
yeah.
with us.
Let us know
If
when
that
you're
actually
going.
happens, yes, for sure. So I'm super excited. So
Yeah, that'll
hopefully
be
that
great.
happens. Yeah, for
Okay,
sure.
okay.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much, Greg. And for those of you guys that haven't, just so you know, we are live on Facebook. We are live on YouTube because I forgot to talk about that in the beginning. And if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, please do go ahead and hit the subscribe button, and then also hit the bell so that you can get the latest content as soon as it is uploaded. So thank you so much, Greg, again for coming on and sharing your story with us. And for everybody else, we will see you next week. So take
All
care.
right. Take care, Szu-Moy. Love you.
Take care. Bye.